Hey everyone, so something I noticed the last time I recorded on this game is that I didn't have much to say during the gameplay and I rather just kind of started telling stories to kill the time. So I decided to do that, and boy, do I have some stories for you. I'm not even going to bother trying to record the game audio or anything. This is just your Subway Surfers while you listen to what I have to say. So, what I wanted to talk about was something that I had touched on in some of my other playthroughs is that I do have experience in the food service industry. I've put in 4 years of service. Um, I started out when I was just in high school, put in as much time as I could. I really wanted to make as much money as possible at the time, and I didn't have anything really better to do. So, after I graduated high school, and I started getting to college, I was still 18, so I was promoted to the role of manager. After about a year in that role and having that weight of responsibility while also trying to get a degree, that really sucks. And this was working at a regional pizza chain. So the writing was on the wall that I kind of needed a change of scenery, especially I started college when COVID hit, and at that point we were maybe at 50% staff, and everyone was fed up with us, and it was just not a good day for food service workers. So I remedied that situation after learning that a couple of my coworkers were getting hired across the street at another chain. It wasn't pizza, and I don't want to really mention the name of it for the sake of these stories, but we will just say that I made burgers and fries. So I go through the interview process and everything's fine and dandy, and at the end of the day I get hired as a shift lead and I get a nice little raise from what I had been making at the pizza chain. And the best part about it is that I didn't have to deal with any delivery drivers anymore, which was a wonderful bonus for me because, man, have I got some crazy stories about that. Pizza delivery drivers, as an employee, will give you the most interesting people you've ever met. My old boss had the idea of making people work in food service as kind of the same structure as required military service in some countries. And honestly, I think that's a great idea because that formative experience you have, you will carry into the rest of your life. And having that amount of empathy and that added perspective just would make things so much easier in how people deal with things. Because whenever I go out to restaurants with coworkers or whoever, I can definitely get a feeling for who has actually had the experience of being here and who is so detached from reality that they do not give a fuck. So anyways, I accept the new job offer and I go in for my first day, which is exactly 2 days after my last day at my old job. I don't know why I didn't give myself a break in between. It just kind of So I head over for my first day as a shift lead at the burger place, and I think I have the general expectation of what's going to go on. I'm ServSafe certified. I have all of the right things. I kind of have an idea of what's going on as I'm about to come in. And I get welcomed by the general manager, and it turns out that I am also welcomed by the district manager for unrelated reasons. So my general manager was not able to focus on my training for my first day as much as he would have liked because the district manager was there to discipline him. So as I'm trying to learn how everything works in this store, I'm getting filled in on the gossip. Apparently, the general manager was having a bit of a romantic stint with an assistant manager. If anybody has any professional experience at all, you will know that this is a big no-no for people of differing positions in power to be romantically involved with each other. However, apparently they are such a power couple that the rest of the staff just kind of kept it a secret, all until one employee fatefully got fired and, in their last bit of revenge, ratted out the couple. So this was an amalgamation of a couple years relationship having to be either broken up or one of them move stores or something like that. That all blowing up in my general manager's face as I'm trying to receive training from him on how everything works here. So that's a very interesting start to my employment at this place. But as time goes on, I end up, really enjoying it there. I'm having a lot of fun. As much fun as you can have. Getting along with team members, making friends, all that good stuff. Something that was most interesting to me as I gained experience is that when new hires came in, you could really tell how fresh they were on the job. It was really like the same kind of dynamic as veteran soldiers looking at new recruits coming into the front lines. And it's so jarring to meet the bright and excited eyes of the youth as a new hire, as you reflect on what you are now, just a couple years older than them, but beaten down from the stress of being told, put the fucking fries in the bag, bro, just a few too many times, by a few too many people who have never worked that hard in their lives. I promise you, the people who have the nerve to be rude to food service staff have never gone through as much stress as this person has gone through in one shift. Let me hop off my soapbox and just get to the point. We had a couple people that were hired as teenagers, and they're with us for a couple months, and they're good additions to the team. However, obviously, these were high school kids, and I was so far beyond and way too cool for that kind of kid talk. Beyond the whole being jaded from the stress of the job thing, it is also really surprising to see just how far you develop emotionally between the ages of like 16 and 19 or 18 and 21 or something like that. Like, talking to someone who's just a couple years younger than me now, like, I have no idea how I was in that space before. Like, it's very hard to go back down to that level after you've had those experiences. So most of the time I just let the kids have their words and, kind of watch in the background because I'm not really sure what's going on in high school at this point. I'm a big boy and I've got my big boy college classes that I have to worry about, and I'm not relating to them as much on that level anymore. There was this one fateful day, however, where the kids were having their normal conversations. Usually there are these two boys that would talk openly about politics or whatever. I think the hot topic of the time was the invasion of Ukraine, as that was starting to break out. And these guys would just kind of like loudly talk about it to the open kitchen. All the diners could hear them, but they didn't seem to care. And I didn't really care to shut them up unless they were saying like some really stupid shit. So they're having their usual conversations and whatnot, and there's this other teenage hire who is a Latina girl, and she always likes to kind of tease them and, just have fun with them or whatever. They're just kids being kids. So they're talking about their experiences or whatnot, and their Latina friend recalls a story about a time that someone had used the G slur against them, the slur that is usually reserved for Mexicans. Now, because she felt entitled to just repeat the story as it was, because that was something that was directed at her in an act of racism, she went ahead and repeated the slur. I didn't take much note of it, seeing that this is someone recounting a time that they were racially discriminated against, and I'm not about to, butt in on that. However, one of the boys, hearing this story about how his coworker was racially harassed, in his infinite wisdom as a 16-year-old white kid from the suburbs, decided to repeat the slur back at her. So after that happened, I figured I should probably start paying a little more attention to this conversation and see where it goes. They try to handle their stuff as well as a 16-year-old can do, especially our Latina friend, who was just trying to stick up for herself and say, hey, that's not appropriate for you to say that. And obviously, the 16-year-old boy in this situation was not really picking up what was being put down here. And I call that on a failure of the U.S. education system as well as the parents of these people. Obviously, I don't think it's the kids' fault because, if you're on this earth and you're still under the care of your parents, you will have a significant amount of influence from those people. And this is not the first time this has happened in my experience. I have known two people from the pizza joint that I used to work at in question that got fired for saying the N-word. Rightfully so, because neither of them actually like admitted to any wrongdoing and stood by their words, which was like really fucked up. Like, bad situation all around in those instances. Both happened to the same person who is still my friend, so that like really sucks. So seeing what happens in the situation, I think everyone kind of separates from each other a little naturally, just from the seriousness of the conversation and the weight of what just happened. So this is the point where I tried to impart a little bit of wisdom on this boy. I say that as if we're not like 2 to 3 years difference in age, probably a little more than that, but still, like, I see the irony in that, but I still wanted to like help this kid out a little bit. So I said something along the lines of, hey man, I understand the nature of your mistake. You probably didn't know any better. However, what our friend here said was right. It is not appropriate for you to say that. And the other part of what I said, which I didn't really think about much when I said it, was I told him as kind of a warning of like, hey, I'd be careful about repeating that again because I have seen people fired for these kinds of instances. Which I guess that was a little bit of a stretch because those other situations were much different. However, I was just trying to look out for this kid and maybe have a little teaching moment and hope that he doesn't like hurt someone in the future. However, I don't think it was received that way, and I didn't take much note of it because we were still in the middle of a dinner service when this conversation was happening. This is kind of a common thing where we'll just talk over while working because like what else are we gonna do? So I was trying to focus on keeping the line up and making sure that we were staying on top of things. And I hadn't noticed that this kid had actually, upon hearing what I said, start to cry and move to the back room. I only really take notice of what's going on here after 10 or 20 minutes or so when my general manager shows up at the store unannounced. So my boss is showing up for whatever reason, I wasn't really sure at the time, and he tells me that this boy's going to be going home a little early just because he was shooken up by the situation. And I was initially pretty confused about it because I wasn't sure what, he was so shaken up by, whether it was like he didn't want to hurt his friend or his coworker or whatnot. And I didn't really have a lot of time to focus on that because I was still in the middle of managing a busy shift. So we get through that shift, and the next shift that I show up for, I'm there a little early as always, and my general manager calls me back to the back room to kind of debrief on what happened the last time. Apparently what had happened is that this kid had started crying because I told him that I have seen other people get fired for this. What I had construed as just kind of like a general warning and trying to look out for him had been construed by him as a threat. So obviously I'm registering this as like total bullshit, overreaction, like I'm not really sure why that would happen. But my general manager explained to me a little bit more about like we want to be careful about using the word fire when we're talking about a lot of these things, just because that's a very scary thing for an employee to do. And I think that was a valuable lesson for me. However, what I didn't like about that interaction was that the focus was entirely on this boy. I had essentially told this teenager not to repeat a racist slur, especially in the presence of a minority affected by that word. And here I am sitting in the back room being reprimanded because the white boy in this situation got sad because I said the word fire. And I don't think much else came of that situation other than the realization for me. It became clear in that moment that this company was willing to protect white fragility more than it was its actual minority employees. I really don't like the fact that this kid crying is what set the whole interaction off rather than an actual slur being repeated. And that really shows you where the focus goes in on a lot of workplace cultures. I kind of learned over a few more instances and a little more reading over the years that workplaces will generally do a lot less to protect minorities than they actually claim to. And I think one thing that really puts it into perspective is how human resources is usually to protect the company rather than to actually protect the individual employees affected. It's usually pretty apparent when one of these situations comes up, especially in the workplace, that the focus is never really on the affected individual or correcting the action that took place. A lot of focus is placed on the actual weight of the accusation and the potential consequences that someone might face for being accused of something. And that's why I think I see a lot more like normalized racism. It got to the point where instead of challenging their beliefs and trying to learn to be better people and be better towards their peers, white people would instead try to find ways to justify why they're good people still. And after doing a bit of reading on the topic, there is an actual academic term for this called white fragility, where in the instance of some kind of accusation happening, the script is flipped and the focus is less on the actual content and the learning, but the feelings of the individual who has been accused, which is a problem for a lot of reasons. One, because the issue doesn't actually get addressed and nothing gets fixed to where the affected parties are actually more welcome in the space. Rather, it puts all of the attention, all of the power, all of the emotional energy onto the person who was accused. And not only does it not solve the conflict at all, it sends a message to the person affected that it was a problem for them to bring it up anyways. The threat of being called racist is so much to these people that they won't actually embrace the learning opportunity to do so. Rather, they want to be told and reassured constantly that, no, actually, no, you're a good person, I swear, it's just a mistake. It takes away the opportunity to learn, and it punishes the affected person even more, because it's essentially telling them, if you have a problem with what this person says, don't bring it up, because they'll get upset and throw a fit over it, and then you have to spend that time reassuring them that it was okay. And as I'm kind of saying this is pretty applicable in a lot of things. Whether it be kind of like an abusive relationship type thing, or even just any kind of workplace dynamic, whether it be involving race or sexism or anything like that. People would rather preserve the status quo and feel good about themselves than actually conducting to a good environment that is welcoming to all. You don't actually want a healthy relationship and to do the emotional work. You just want to be told that you're a good boyfriend over and over again. So I think this is a much more broader conversation topic that has to do with the ability to accept criticism. If you're not able to take the possibility that you can say something offensive, and you're not able to approach that from a learner's perspective of trying to figure out how to be a better person, that's emotional work that you need to do. However, in the case of building something like an equitable relationship or an equal opportunity workplace, people don't actually care about building those things. They care more about peace. They would rather not have conflict. They would rather maintain the status quo. I think what a lot of people don't realize is that when you do want to make something better, things have to change. And sometimes that change is going to be uncomfortable. Sometimes that's going to be really uncomfortable, or more uncomfortable than you're really willing to bear. And that's okay to have that feeling of discomfort. The one thing you can't do, however, is offload that discomfort, that emotional weight, onto the person you're actually affecting. That's where that kind of toxic dynamic starts, because you're not dealing with the actual emotion of being criticized. You're not dealing with the emotion and taking accountability for what you're actually doing. All you're doing is you're offloading that stress onto someone else, and that someone else could very well be someone you care about. So I think it's all important that we embrace the fact that we're not perfect, we're going to fuck up, and that's an okay thing to do. And I think a lot of people also get hung up on the concept of calling themselves good people and identifying with the notion of being good without actually putting forth that effort. Because the truth is, there is no good person or bad person. We are only the sums of our actions and our choices. So if you really want to be the good person that you claim yourself to be, what you should do is make a better choice instead of constantly asking for reassurance on if you're good. If we all committed ourselves to making better choices instead of only trying to describe ourselves as good people without fault, I think we'd actually make a lot better of an environment. And also, I think a part of that is being a little more forgiving. Obviously, I'm not asking someone who has been affected by racism or sexism to react to that in any other way than the way that they feel they need to, because that turns into a safety issue and all kinds of things. I'm not telling someone that they can't have their reaction to anything. However, I think it is a little problematic how we latch on to one person's bad choice as a definition for that person. And I know humans have a negative bias with these experiences like that, but it's still important to consider that people grow and people change. And as long as people show the willingness to learn and the willingness to get better, I don't see how there's any reason why we shouldn't turn them away. Well, I think that's really good timing because I finished up that continent and we're moving on to Europe next. So, I'll stop yapping for now. If you did listen to me the entire time, thanks. Leave a comment if you have anything to say about this. I do believe I'll put in the description a book recommendation called White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. That's a book that I read recently that might be interesting and kind of related to what I've been talking about. Could be worth your while. But anyways, next continent, I'll probably have some other kind of story or conversation topic mentioned, because really this is just a racing game and I don't have a whole lot to say on this. So thanks for watching. If you want to see more of this, let me know, and cheers!